This happened back in the late 1980s, when I was home one summer on break from college. About 2 years prior, my dad had purchased an old house with the intention of eventually tearing it down to build a new home. The house was built in 1916, and like most homes built in that era, it had a really unconventional floor plan. There was a central living room and kitchen like any normal house, but 3 bedrooms were more akin to separate apartments. Each had its own separate outside entrance, a private bathroom, and a door that led to the common area living room and kitchen. Perhaps the place was originally intended to be a boarding house or something. I really don't know. The other thing that was a little creepy about the house was that it was all wood. The ceilings, walls, and floors were all brown, and nothing was ever painted or plastered. My dad was a pretty cool guy. While he was waiting for permits and financing, he let 3 of my friends live there for free in exchange for watching the place. They had a lot of parties, but my dad didn't care as long as none of the neighbors complained. I went to a few of these parties there myself, when I was lucky enough to be home from college. Eventually, 2 of my friends moved out, leaving my one buddy there to watch the mostly empty house on his own. He was not the type of person to be afraid of living alone in a half-empty house, so he was fine with the situation. I was at home one afternoon when the phone rang. It was my buddy, and he sounded terrified. He tells me to call the police and to meet him out in the front of the driveway of the house, but under no conditions go in. I ask him why, and he tells me that there's this crazy clown in the house. Apparently, he'd been sick with the flu and in bed for the previous 2 days. When he finally felt well enough to go into the kitchen to get something to eat, he ran face to face with a crazy woman dressed in a clown suit and makeup who started screaming at him. It was then that he ran out of the house and called me in a panic from a nearby gas station. I called the police and they drove over to the house, which was about 2 miles away. I found my buddy on the sidewalk out front and he's already shaken up. I asked him to describe what he saw, and he keeps saying that there's a crazy woman in the house. I ask for more specific details, and he describes her as dressed in a white clown suit with red makeup smeared all over her face. He's still a little sick, so he looks really bad, and honestly, he's really freaking me out as well. There was no way in hell that I was going to go into that house to investigate his story. After what seemed like an eternity, a cop showed up. My buddy tells him the exact same story. The cop then goes into the house while we wait outside. After about 5 minutes, he emerged escorting a crazy clown woman who looked exactly as my friend described her. She was wild, unkempt, had brown hair, and was wearing this weird, baggy, one-piece, all-white body jumpsuit. What was really disturbing, though, is her face. She had a tube of lipstick, which she crudely spread red all over her cheeks in a failed attempt, I suppose, to make them look rosy. Although we were both freaked out, the cop thought it was hilarious. The clown woman claimed it was her house, and then accused us of being on drugs and trespassing on her property. When the cop told her to get in the back of his squad car, she warned him that she had powerful friends in Tinseltown who would have him fired. When he came back to talk to us, he told us that he can't arrest her for breaking in and entering the house because it was half abandoned. He said the best he could do was drive her a few blocks away and hope that she didn't wander back. This of course freaks us out even more. Fortunately though, when they ran a background check on her, it turns out that she had an outstanding warrant and would be going to jail instead. When we went back into the house, we find all kinds of crazy stuff written on the kitchen cabinets in the same red lipstick she had rubbed all over her face. There were also some 10-day-old fish in the fridge that my friend never got around to eating that she cooked on the stove and ate. The really scary thing though was that this crazy woman was in the same house with my friend for at least a day while he was sick and semi-delirious in bed with a fever. She was probably harmless, but who knows what she would have done if she stumbled upon him while he was sleeping. His door was unlocked the entire time. Fortunately, she never did as far as we know. I'm a 19-year-old female, about 165 pounds. I'm also about 5'9". I live with my grandmother, and we really don't get along, but I don't have any other options for the moment, so I manage. I usually have to take out the garbage when she tells me to, and I really hate doing it. This week, we had a lot to set out because my grandmother was getting a new bed, and her room had a lot of stuff in it that needed to be cleaned out so as to make room. I was getting her old computer stand that she calls the monstrosity, and I had to clean the stuff out of my room as well to make it fit. This is why we had a lot of stuff to get rid of this week, and I was the one to have to make it all fit in one small bin. It was about 10 p.m. I'd already taken out the trash, but I needed to go fix the stupid recycling bin as ours was way too small, and I had to flatten the boxes to make everything fit without falling out. I was in the garage and the garage door was open. I live in a quiet little nest of townhomes, and we don't own a car, so the garage was used as our storage place for everything else. Now, I listen to creepy stories on YouTube, and I was listening to one before I started taking out the trash. Being outside in the cold and the quiet and dark month of October made me quite a bit jumpy. I know people do crazy stuff to scare others for kicks and laughs, but it never happened to me before, so me looking up every so often to the door wasn't really out of the question. Of course, I knew I was overreacting, but I still felt uneasy, like I knew something wasn't right. I was fiddling with the recycling bin for about 5 minutes at this point when I glanced up at the door. To my complete horror, I saw a clown standing in the middle of the sidewalk of my driveway, staring right at me. All the blood from my face drained. I couldn't help but feel it. You always hear about these things, but until you live it, be thankful you don't know what it is. The clown was straight out of a horror movie. Smudgy makeup, red nose, and hair, and a black and white striped clown outfit with rainbow spots. I was frozen in fear. I never really felt fear before in my life, and this isn't something I ever want to feel again. I shot up when it took a step forward. It was at this point I noticed it. How had I missed something so important? The clown had a butcher knife. At this point, the clown was about 5 footsteps from the garage door. I knew that if I stayed put any longer, I was probably going to die. I really don't know how I did this, and it's really a blur because of the adrenaline that was running through me. All I remember was that he was grinning and showing piss yellow teeth while running at me. Somehow, I managed to jump backwards inside the thankfully open door and close it. Thank God I always make sure the door leading to the garage is locked 24/7, because I'm always afraid of something or someone barging in. The clown was banging on the metal door and trying to break it down. At this point, my grandmother came to see what the hell was going on, and I told her to call the cops now. She went to grab the phone. I was still holding myself against the door. I had my shoes on, and I had a strong grip on the floor. This clown was not getting in. The banging got more frantic as the guy was backing up and then banging into the door with his whole body. I placed both my feet on the door leading to the kitchen. My house has the kitchen and laundry room together, and the laundry room leads to the garage. It's no more than 2 regular doors big, and I'm about 5'9", so in this case it was good to hold my upper back against the door. I heard the cop cars and I knew they were right outside my house, and no more than seconds later I heard a cop saying, "Open up, this is the police." I put my feet down, still ready to slam the door closed in case that this was the damn clown. I know this was stupid because I heard the cars and radio, but I was still very scared and on edge. I cracked the door to see a cop with a gun drawn in his hand. I opened the door all the way, and my knees gave out and I fell on my butt, staring at the knife stabbed in the metal door. The cop could easily see the trash that was kicked around from the guy, and my very pale look, and the face that I was visibly shaking. About 5 to 6 cops showed up and took a look around and outside of my house, and took statements and removed the knife from my door. They said we'd get a call back in a couple of days. 2 of the cops are still driving past my street about every half hour. I was never this scared of clowns. I'm still not, but hell, I don't like them, and I don't want to see any clowns for a good while. I really never thought that this kind of shit happened in real life, and never to me, but I was wrong. This can happen to anyone. Never think that it can't. This world is full of crazy people that just want to scare the shit out of you, or just plain want to kill you for kicks. Anyway, just remember to pay attention to the things around you. I've never had any experiences that really freaked me out, except this one. I was around 11 years old, and was with my sister and her friends. We're all girls. They were all around 16 years old, and were taking me trick-or-treating. We were going door to door to get candy, and playing with silly string. I kept getting this weird feeling, like I was looking behind me constantly, and I had no clue why. Around 9:30 p.m., I turned around quickly, and there was a guy dressed up as a clown about 2 yards behind us. I wasn't really scared about this because I like clowns, and since this was the first time I saw him, I figured that he was just trick-or-treating. But he followed us for another hour, never getting candy, and waiting for us at each house we stopped at. At this point, I was stressing and told my sister about the clown. She decided that we try to go a completely different route and see if he still followed us. So we all crossed the street, and he still followed us. My sister absolutely hates clowns and was totally freaked out, so she called our dad to pick us up. We continued walking for around 30 minutes until our dad called us, saying where he was parked. We all started walking fast toward the direction of my dad's car, but that's when the clown ran in front of us and tried to corner us. I think he knew that we were trying to leave. My sister and her friends were freaking out, and me, being naive and outspoken, I yelled at the clown to leave us alone. I remember that he tilted his head to the side when I said that, kind of like a confused dog. I grabbed my sister's silly string and told the clown that if he didn't leave us alone, I'd ruin his outfit with silly string. Again, I was a naive kid. I actually thought that he would be scared of silly string. The clown didn't back off, so I stringed him all over his mask and costume. While I did this, my sister called our dad again, telling him to hurry where we were. The clown struggled to get the string off his mask so he could see, but we were already running. My dad came around the corner and we all rushed inside the car. The clown caught up with us, trying to open the car door, but it was locked. As my dad hit the gas, the clown slammed his hands on the back of the window. I remember watching him out the back window, trying to chase the car, but failing. I never really did figure out what was up with that clown, but there were other reports of a clown around the same time, with the same description of chasing kids in our area. This happened back in 1980. I was 5 years old, and I was invited to a neighbor's birthday party. We lived in the quiet suburbs of Baltimore, Maryland. It was an idyllic town. Trees lined the streets, looking over the neighborhood like giant looming sentinels. It was early October. I remember this because the houses were decorated for Halloween. The boys' parents pulled out all the stops to make their son's party one to remember. There was a slow-moving, sad-faced donkey that the smaller children were permitted to ride. I was not allowed to ride the donkey. I was a fat boy, even at age 5. I was also as loud as I was fat. It was my loud mouth that caused this pleasant afternoon of cake, ice cream, and piñatas to quickly unravel into a horrifying nightmare. Aside from the usual entertainment at a 7-year-old's party, there was a clown. The clown walked around silently, prancing and smiling. He would laugh silently. He would do the old, "I got your nose" trick, and pull coins out from behind our ears. He made balloon animals and attempted to ride a unicycle. The other kids laughed. I hated the clown. Everything about him made me uncomfortable, and because of this, my fat 5-year-old self decided it was a decent idea to give the clown a hard time. Birthday Boy announced aloud that it was time to head inside to see the special clown magic show. All the kids went into the living room and sat on the hardwood floor. I stood in the back. The clown proceeded with the magic show. He pulled a fake rabbit out of his hat and performed other hack tricks. As I stood in the back of the room and jeered him, I would yell out how the tricks were done. The clown continued to silently smile, making no sound as he went about his magical presentation. His face said happiness, but his eyes screamed in rage at me. This went on for about 15 minutes. The kids laughed as the clown fumbled through some crappy dime store magic tricks. I don't know if it was an act of mercy, but Birthday Boy's parents shouted, "Piñata time!" and all the kids ran outside to smash a cardboard donkey stuffed with candy. After a few minutes outside, all of the fruit punch I drank throughout the day wanted out. I scurried back into the house in search of the toilet. The house was quiet, and the sun had shifted in the sky, leaving the kitchen and the adjoining hallway bathed in a murky early evening light. As I walked through the kitchen and into the hall, the clown stepped outside into the hallway. He stood there, staring at me. It seemed like one of those Wild West showdowns from the cowboy movies my dad used to watch on television. He lurched slowly toward me, his painted smile unwavering, but his eyes bloodshot and filled with unbridled hatred. "Here, Piggy Piggy." I walked a few steps in reverse before spinning on my heels and trying to make it to the kitchen. I felt a large hand on my shoulder. I was spun around forcefully and fell to the floor. The clown stood above me for a moment, putting a giant clown shoe on my fat chest. I remember trying to squirm, and I remember wanting to scream and cry for help, but it never happened. He stood over me, pinning me to the floor, brandishing one of those old-style seltzer bottles. He proceeded to spray the crotch of my pants, and in a sing-song voice sang a stupid song until the contents of the bottle were drained. When he removed his foot from my chest, I lashed out with my feet, kicking at his shins and trying to scurry away at the same time. I ran into a pantry and slammed the door. It was a really terrible hiding place. He had to have seen where I went. The pantry was about 4 feet from where I was laying on the floor just moments ago. It was dark in the pantry, and smelled of Pine Sol cleaning solvent. There was no lock on the inside to protect me from the clown. In the dark pantry, I slid to the floor and tried not to sob uncontrollably. Minutes passed. Those minutes felt like hours. I heard no sound other than my wheezing and a fear fart that squeaked out. "Oh, Piggy, Piggy, did you make poopy in the pantry?" The voice came from inside the dark pantry in which I was hiding, or so I thought. I froze in fear, not moving, not breathing. I did not know where the clown was. If he was in the pantry with me, I needed to get out. If he was out there, I needed to stay in the pantry. I lowered my head to the floor and squinted through the gap between the bottom of the pantry door and the floor. There was not much to see. What little light bled through the bottom of the door was quickly blacked out, and a bloodshot eye stared back at me from the other side of the door. There was a low, guttural laugh and a voice that hissed. I squeezed my eyes shut and started crying at a near hysterical level. The door swung open, and I screamed as loud as I could. Standing in the doorway was my dad. "What the hell are you doing?" he asked. "Clown!" I screamed. He carried me out of the pantry, and out of the house, and back to the safety of our house. It started in a haunted cave on Halloween. Just me and my friend Anna. Me and Anna were total opposites. She's blonde, outgoing, and completely fearless. I'm dark-haired, introverted, and a people pleaser. We go through the cave, and it was pretty awesome. The usual people with chainsaws, screamers, and clowns. One clown kept following us. He wasn't like the other clowns who wore face paint with fake blood splattered on them. He didn't have a big red nose and clown clothes. He had on regular, if not tattered jeans, a stained, sweaty white tee, and a clown mask. This mask was pretty detailed. It had the eyes cut out and a mouth with blood smeared around it. It was seriously creepy. He followed us all the way through the house as we giggled and ran through the fog room at the end. Once we made it outside, we went to get cocoa and watch the local bands play. While in line, the clown walks up and stands inches away from me, breathing in and out so hard that his mask stuck to his face and released with each breath. He walked away and we giggled, but he stayed close by. We walk over to the band and he stands right behind me. He starts tugging on my hair. I ignore it, but he tugs harder. Suddenly, he pulled so hard that my head whips back. Anna started yelling at him, and he lets go and walks away, but like before, not too far. She wanted to tell someone, but I didn't want to. We were at a haunted cave and he probably didn't mean to, I said. But she said that the operators weren't allowed to touch us, and so we walked over to the ticket booth to complain. Anna said, "Ma'am, your clown over there pulled my friend's hair so hard it almost ripped out." The ticket lady responded, "I don't see any of our clowns. They're all in the cave. None of our people walk around out here. They're behind the rope because some families with small kids come just for the hay rides and band." Anna was puzzled and felt agitated, so she responded that the clown had been right there and asked the ticket lady how she had not seen the clown. The ticket lady told Anna to calm down and that that was not one of their clowns, and asked if we were sure that he wasn't one of our friends. The clown was still staring. Fearless Anna decided to confront the clown. She marched right up to him, with me behind her, and demanded that he took off his mask. He doesn't speak. He looks at me. He reaches out with his hand, but I refuse to touch him. He pushed Anna from in front of me and stepped 2 inches from my face, and began a scream that has to be the most terrifyingly psychotic scream I've ever heard. Everyone turned to look. The band even stopped playing. Anna grabbed me by the arm and pulled. His stare had me frozen. Then Anna grabbed my face and slapped me, and we ran. I looked behind and he was standing, staring at us. Everyone else went back to what they were doing like it was nothing. We got to the car and peeled out. Anna kept saying that we needed the police. I told her that it wasn't that big of a deal, because it was a weirdo at a haunted cave. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. He had a knife. That's why she slapped me and pulled me away, not from the fear of being screamed at. She saw the knife in his hand. We contacted the police, but they didn't take us seriously. I'm now afraid to go to haunted attractions, not because they are scary, but you never really know if someone works there, or if they're there because they fit in so well.
When I was 12, we lived in a semi-rural area that was about 10 minutes drive from the closest little town. All of the properties around us were acreage, so we didn't have any neighbors close to us. My mom was a single mom, so it was just my mom, my younger brother, and I, and our dog, living in a kind of isolated little house. We all loved where we lived, and the isolation was one of the best things about it. One night, my mom decided to treat herself and take the time for a relaxing bath instead of a shower. Being a super busy single mom, this rarely happened. Because our house was little, the laundry, shower, and bath, as well as the toilet, were all in the same room. I knocked on the door and called out to my mom that I was coming in to go to the toilet. As I opened the door, I see a man standing at the window above the bath, watching my mom. He looked like a bad version of a horror movie clown, minus the makeup. He was maybe 50, with a big bald spot on top, and straggly thin hair around the bottom. As soon as he saw me, he sort of ducked before moving quickly out of view. I started screaming to my mom that there was a man at the window, and I swear to God, I didn't know a human could move so quick. She was instantly out of the bath, wrapped in a towel, and grabbing me and my little brother to lock us all in my bedroom. We called the police and waited, terrified, because we didn't know if he was still around. After what felt like forever, we heard our dog barking and an engine revving. This was even more horrifying because we didn't know if it was the guy who had come back with his truck, or if it was the police. My mom eventually decided that she had to go and check. I had been experimenting with cutting my hair that day, so I sent her out of the room armed with a pair of scissors and a hairbrush. It wasn't a man in the end, it was the police, who were scared to get out of their car because of our dog, so they decided to rev the engine to let us know that they were there. In the end, they just made a report, had a look around, and then eventually left. We also left that night and stayed at a friend's for a few nights. When we returned to the house a few days later, we had a message on our answering machine. All it said, in a really creepy voice, was, "I kicked your dog." We called the police again, because they had told us on the first night that our dog had obviously been intimidated somehow by the guy, because she hadn't barked at him, although she would normally bark at anyone when they first got to our house. They said that they would trace the call and eventually get back to us. 3 months later, I had broken my foot the day before, so I was hobbling around on crutches, when all of a sudden I heard my brother screaming from the bathroom. We had a big piece of fabric pinned up over the bathroom window while we got new curtains made, but the breeze had made the makeshift curtain move. While my brother was in the shower, he had seen the shape of a face in the little gap between the fabric, and had leaned forward to move the fabric, only to come face to face with a different man. As soon as he screamed, my mom turned into Supermom, who you wouldn't have wanted to mess with, and ran out of the house with a knife. I was screaming and hopping around on one leg with my crutches, panicking that my mom and brother would run away, but that I would still be left with this perceived psycho killer. Sadly, he managed to get away before my mom could see him. Again, we called the police and they came to make a report, but this time, they decided my brother and I should go to a confit. I'm pretty sure that's what they called it, but essentially, it's where you make a mugshot out of the person by choosing the features from a book of different eyes, noses, etc. When we finished, the officers looked at us seriously and said that they knew who we had identified. The first one I saw was a convicted murderer who had only been released from jail a couple months earlier. Turns out he used to live on the property that backed onto ours, but because he had a big property, it was about 5 acres away. He used to watch his neighbor's wife when she was in the shower, so the husband eventually went to confront him about it and was shot dead on the driveway. The second man, who my brother had seen, turned out to be a sexual deviant and pedophile. He was a guy in his early 20s, the son of a high-profile family in the area, and well known for watching people and children in the bath. The police didn't do anything with our case, and we eventually sold the house and moved away. We never spent another night in that house. A few months later, a news story appeared in the paper. The younger one had been arrested with over 600 left shoes in the trunk of his car. Apparently, that was his fetish, and he kept them as trophies.
I am a native Floridian and have proudly called South Florida home for my entire life. Living here, you come to understand that there is a different vibe you get here that is nowhere else in this country, and throughout the state, you can expect to encounter a certain measure of offbeat weirdness anywhere you go. This pervasive wackiness keeps things interesting, but occasionally, it can go in a very dark direction. This eccentric Floridian attitude apparently extended even to the neighborhood creepers. Considering that peeping toms are already creepy enough to begin with, this is really saying something. By day, my Fort Lauderdale neighborhood looks like any other typical middle-class American suburb. By night, however, it can become the stomping ground of a truly unusual creeper. You see, what sets this peeping tom apart from all the rest is his costumes, or in several cases, complete lack of, as in no clothing whatsoever, when he goes out to the town. Over the years, various people have spotted him either completely naked, in nothing but tighty-whities, a Spider-Man costume, a chicken costume, the top half of a clown suit, complete with face paint and a frilly collar, a hot pink Speedo, a Dracula cape, a Gandalf costume, and, according to at least one witness, what appeared to be an Organization 13 cloak from the Kingdom Hearts video game. In spite of these outrageous get-ups, no one has any idea who this guy is, and have never gotten a truly good look at his face. He doesn't appear to cover a large territory, only about 3 blocks or so, and when spotted, it was usually just a glance. I've certainly never seen anyone resembling him out during the day. But what I can tell you is that he's a very tall, lanky man, probably in his late 40s, with pasty white skin and shoulder-length, greasy-looking, stringy hair. He also appears to have a long, Duck Dynasty-esque beard or goatee, although given his tendency to accessorize, this could really just be a disguise as well. You would think that a guy of this description would really stand out on a dark street, which makes it a wonder that the cops have never been able to catch him. This supports the idea that if he only covers a small area, that he can then make a quick getaway if he needs to. For as long as he's been doing this, he doubtless knows all the hiding spots and shortcuts, as well as who has dogs and whether they are kept outside. He certainly seems to know who has security cameras installed. He almost seems to taunt these people, staying just out of range, so all you can really make out is a white blob moving around in the dark, without any real details. My friend across the street caught him on camera one night, and the next day when we watched the playback, we watched as the creeper roamed around the periphery of my friend's front yard for several minutes. He peeked into the family room window, dragged potted plants off the side of his house, rearranged lawn ornaments, and even picked fruit off his orange tree. At one point, he appeared to wave at the camera. In case you were wondering, he was wearing nothing but his briefs on this occasion. Another reason he has probably gotten away with what he has done for so long is that he is very random. You may not see him for months or even years, then he'll suddenly start to show up again. Also, there are very few night owls in my neighborhood, and seeing how he appears to be most active in the wee hours, much of what he does goes unnoticed. If he is spotted, it is by chance. My most personal encounter with him came at about 2003, when I was up late, maybe around 2:30, finishing up a paper for class that I was taking. I felt hungry afterwards, so I decided to get takeout at Denny's. On returning home, I was unpacking my car when I noticed that something in my peripheral vision seemed to be out of place. Looking closer, I saw a tall man standing in the shadows between my house and the neighbor's house, watching me. Because of how dark that part of the yard was, and the way he was standing part way between the edge of my wall, I got the impression that he believed I couldn't see him. He had shoulder-length hair and no shirt. He did appear to have long shorts on, but in the dark, it was impossible to be certain. My first thought was that it was my friend across the street, primarily because he worked very late back then and knew I was usually up late myself. In fact, he would occasionally tap on my window to talk if he had a lot on his mind, so as not to knock on my front door and awaken my whole family. I called out his name and began to approach him. However, after I got within a few feet, I realized that this was no one I knew. I quickly retreated to the front door of my car and stared back at the guy, ready to dive back inside and lock the doors if he made a move toward me. The whole time I had been walking toward him, he had stood his ground and not moved a single inch. Under normal circumstances, I would probably have tackled the guy and beat him up. But the idea of wrestling with a half-naked stranger in the dark really didn't appeal to me. Most importantly, I had no idea if he was carrying a weapon or not. My thinking was that he must have had a reason to feel pretty confident to be staring me down in front of my own yard. It was an incredibly unnerving experience to be staring down a stranger in a quiet, dark neighborhood at 3:30 in the morning. Finally, I yelled out, "Who are you?" He seemed to smile at this. "What are you doing here?" I got no response from him, so I told him to get out and that I was calling the police. I ducked down into my car to look as if though I was reaching for a cell phone, which was a total bluff since I had foolishly left it inside. When I got back up, he was gone. Seconds later, I heard him jump the neighbor's chain link fence and could tell their backyard motion lights had gone off. I could hear another fence further down their property being jumped as well, implying he had gone to the next street over. Looking over my shoulder the whole time, I unlocked my front door, awoke my family, and told them what had happened. It was then I learned that earlier that night they had been awakened by odd sounds outside their windows, but had not seen anything when they looked outside. Later, we also learned our neighbor had been woken up about that same time by her dog growling, but she had disregarded it. She had been awakened a second time when he jumped her fences and set off her patio light. For an older guy, he seemed pretty agile. Anyway, the police were called and of course found nothing. They did, however, discover fresh cigarette butts at the side of our house and in the neighbor's front bushes. Nobody in either household smoked.